It was surreal to see my hospital on the front page of the New York Times.
Today is kind of getting worse and worse. We had to get a refrigerated truck to store the bodies of patients who are dying.
My attending, Dr. Colleen Smith, reached out for help through this powerful video. I was a second-year emergency medicine resident at the time when my hospital in Elmhurst, Queens was being called the epicenter of the COVID pandemic. My coworkers were incredible, and they did everything they could to protect each other and our patients, no matter how crazy things got. Even still, because we didn't have all the right PPE, we couldn't fully protect ourselves from COVID. Everyone was afraid of transmitting COVID to their loved ones. Across hospitals, there were obvious disparities in our levels of protection. Some had N95s and PAPRs, others didn't. Some had full-body hazmat suits, others had thin disposable gowns. And then there were these garbage bags. We were in crisis mode in New York City. In response, my partner Dan and I quickly came up with a low-cost and sustainable idea: to give every frontline healthcare worker a reusable coverall. It would last not only for the duration of the COVID pandemic, but for any unforeseeable mass exposure. We showed how feasible this is through a grassroots project we called Frontline Suits, which started around the same time Dr. Smith's video came out in March of 2020. I was rotating in the medical ICU as the only in-house doctor at night. I had the standard PPE, which was an N95, goggles, and a disposable gown. This seemed fine until I led my first code of a COVID-positive patient. We had over 10 people packed into the room, an emergent intubation, chest compressions, and a cordis placement. So much of our bodies were still exposed. That was the first time that I was just as worried about my team members as I was my patient. I was really distraught over this, and when I got home, the first thing that Dan and I did was research PPE in other countries. There was early research simulating an intubation wearing standard PPE, showing that secretions can still land on your neck, ears, and hair. Around the same time, this study from Wuhan showed full coverage during the intubation of over 200 COVID patients. They had 0 cases of transmission to the provider. But countries like China seem to have an unlimited supply of disposable coveralls, which we don't have in the US. This is exactly what Dr. Atul Gawande wrote in The New Yorker last year. That's how we came up with reusable coveralls, not just for myself or other doctors, but also for techs, nurses, and anyone exposed to COVID. Before acting on assumptions, we thought through some key questions. First, would healthcare workers even want to wear a reusable coverall? I tested this out by wearing a coverall in the ED when no one else wore one at the time. It became clear that I wasn't the only one who wanted to wear it when my coworkers asked me where they could get one themselves. My intuition was further validated by a survey we made to better understand frontline workers' concerns about PPE. This doubled as a donation request form to make sure that we only donated a coverall to individuals who wanted one. Another key question was how to ensure safe use of the coveralls. We didn't want individuals to stop wearing disposable gowns, so we used the form to communicate instructions about wearing coveralls properly under standard PPE. On March 23rd, we launched our GoFundMe campaign to donate reusable coveralls and face shields. Within 13 hours, we surpassed our goal of $50,000. Within a few weeks, we distributed over 1,000 reusable coveralls and 1,000 face shields across 13 hospitals in New York City. The nurses, techs, respiratory therapists, custodians, and doctors who received donations were so grateful. Admin leadership at Elmhurst added reusable coveralls to their supply list because of this work. Dan and I published an op-ed in CNN about why we need reusable head-to-toe coverage, and we advocated for a higher standard of PPE. By April, most Elmhurst ED employees could be seen wearing the donated reusable coveralls. Here's some of their feedback.
I love it. It's like a lifesaver. I feel so much safer with this.
Protects my clothes over top, so that way when I leave the hospital, my clothes are still safe.
I love my new suit. It's so much cooler than the Tyvek. I get really hot and sweaty wearing the Tyvek suit all day.
We also helped develop and design the manufacturing of reusable coveralls using medical-grade fabric. We ended up raising over $100,000 and continue to donate reusable coveralls outside of New York City, including to Navajo and Blackfeet nations. Our dream would be to scale this model of reusable coveralls to prepare for any mass exposure in the future. Frontline suits got us both through some of our toughest times in the pandemic. Despite being surrounded by tragedy, we kept focused on solutions and helping our community. It taught us about how to innovate rapidly during times of crisis. First, provide directly to those most impacted by the problem. Second, get direct feedback and iterate quickly in feedback loops. Third, prioritize sustainable solutions. As just a second-year resident, it taught me that pretty much anyone can create change by building power from the ground up. Last but not least, it taught me that we don't have to compete with each other for resources or our livelihood. Instead, we can continue our amazing work of caring for our patients while protecting each other, our loved ones, and ourselves.